We are live. Welcome to my podcast, Secrets of Success. We are on episode number 2 with Dr. Shane Needham, where our theme is never be outworked. Thank you so much for all of you that joined us Monday and all the comments. I hope they were answered, all the questions where we talked about COVID-19 testing. It was just amazing. You can still see that on the archive portion of Facebook on my timeline. So and we're going to be editing that a little bit, compressing it, and I'll make it live on my new YouTube channel as well, or make it archived on my YouTube channel as well. Go to my website, drsneedham.com, drsneedham.com. Log in there and tell me, stay on my list, and we will keep you posted on all the things that are up and coming. Today, it is a pleasure to welcome Aaron Couch. He is a friend and a pastor. Really the first pastor that I really became friends with and really had a close relationship with. We'll talk about that in a minute. Since it's only episode 2, I wanted to introduce myself a little bit as well. I am Shane Needham. I have a PhD in chemistry. I'm a scientist. I own a testing laboratory, and I also am more proud of being a disciple, a father, scientist, entrepreneur, a bodybuilder, power lifter, a coach, a mentor. Now I can call myself a podcaster. I'm also a motivational speaker. Go check out my TED Talk. You can do a search, or you can go to my website and check out my TED Talk as well. And so Aaron is a great friend of mine. I still call him my pastor. When I talk to my friends, when I talk to close people, I still say, my pastor said this. And I live in Moscow, Idaho, and he moved to Denver about a year ago now. Is that right, Aaron?
8 or 9 months ago. Yeah. So
Okay.
July would have been July 1 is officially when we did that.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you like it or not, but I still call you my pastor. So, Aaron, can you introduce yourself, and then we'll go over kind of an outline of what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to be talking about faith and how important faith is during COVID-19, during this self-isolation, during this pandemic that we're experiencing. So, Aaron, introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself and kind of your history and what you guys are up to now.
Yeah. So I've been in ministry forever. My dad was a pastor, preacher growing up, and then I graduated high school, and right out of high school went to Bible college with a commitment to go into the ministry, and did that. Was 23 years old in my first ministry, and then got this wild hair to plant a church, and partnered with another guy who was the lead planner. I was the co-planner, which means I was the utility player. I did all the things that needed to be done, whatever that was. 9 years we were there, and then felt the itch to plant again. And then that's when we moved to Moscow, where you're at. And we were there 12 years, planted a church there, had a great ministry, made some great friends, you being one of those for sure. And then felt like it was time to be done, and then stepped into an existing church here in Denver. We've been here again, since July. So whatever that is, 9-10 months. I don't remember for sure, but we came here as kind of a new adventure. I'm a planter by proxy. I never meant to be a church planter, to start it from scratch. But
I like to call Aaron a church entrepreneur. He's awesome at that.
Well, thank you. I don't know if that's true or not, but I stepped into an existing church here that was fairly large, and it's been a new experience. It's good. It's been wonderful, but it's been a new experience as far as dealing with not building from the ground up. So we've been here, and it's been a lot of fun. Yeah. We have a wife, 4 kids.
Aaron's way too humble. So he was telling me offline just some things that have happened in the church, and I'm not surprised. I'm going to say it himself. He's humble. He doesn't like to brag. And so, but under his leadership, if I can say that, the church has grown by thousands from the time that he took it over 8 months ago, or is leading it, or helped leading it, whatever, to now. And that's just amazing. And I'm not surprised. We'll talk about our stories here in a minute, but when I first met Aaron and he started telling me some of the things that he did, and I'm like, this guy can't be outworked. And now we've got this challenge going on, this 30-day challenge. And of course he posts on my timeline at Facebook and all the time. It's, I didn't miss another workout. And I'm just like, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised he's the guy that's posting and not missing workouts. And that's just how he is. So we're going to talk about faith. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about faith today, and we're going to talk about our stories and how we met, and kind of, I want to hear his story, what his version is, and then I'll tell him my version. But then also, what are the concerns of Aaron? Is one of the best reflective listeners I know in the world. He's taught me a lot. He's also has counseling credentials and stuff like that. So he's a counselor in the churches and so on and so forth. And so he hears a lot about what church people are afraid of, what their fears are, what their concerns are. And so we're going to hear about what are the concerns in this pandemic of people. And is this anything new? Is this something we've seen in our lifetime of people being fearful like this? And then we're going to obviously talk about, have we ever seen this in history? And we'll probably relate that to the Bible. And then how do we deal with that? Okay. How do we deal with it? And what is faith, and what is faith during these times, and how important is it? And then I want Aaron to talk about any special projects that he may be involved in or wants to talk about. So Aaron, without further ado, I want to hear your story of how, I'm trying to remember how we met, what your story is, and then we can kind of compare.
Well, it was a hot summer day in July of 2015.
That is true.
Yeah. So the way I remember it is we got connected just because of my son was a high school wrestler, and you were stepping into the program as the head coach, and was talking about taking kids to the Boise State competition camp for wrestling, and I was like, that's a great camp. My son had happened to jump in with the Pullman team the year before on that. And so I just knew, like, you're getting a season's worth of matches in a week. And so it was a great camp, and you were looking for transportation. And so I went up to you after that meeting and said, hey, our church has a van. If you're taking 11 kids, let me just drive you down. So we jumped in, and I didn't know you from, I didn't know how we were going to get along at all, but it was really funny. You know, my remembrance of it is that I always look in my friendships for people, like in the Bible, the story of the Bible talks about David and Jonathan and how God knit their hearts together. And I felt like from the get-go, whatever our connection was, I felt like it was more than just wrestling. Like we've always had a really good kind of transparent, open connection about things. And I just, I felt like, yeah, okay, this is something that the Lord put together, that we're going to be friends for a long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to, so that it was like 110 degrees when we were leaving Moscow, or at least 100. And then in Boise, it was 110.
Yeah.
And we drive in this van. It's a 5 or 6 hour drive. We got screaming kids that are eating all kinds of sugary things in the back. We had a blast. I mean, and the camp, it's large enough where they have to have it in an outdoor place where they don't have, I mean, it's covered, but they don't have any HVACs. There's no air conditioning. Oh man, it was hot. It was hot for those kids, but it was a great time. I want to tell you a little bit about what a lot of people don't know pastors deal with. And this is when my eyes were opened. Okay. I've been faithful for most of my adult life, and I believe in Jesus Christ, the Savior, and God. And, but I didn't really know what pastors did. And I've gone through several different types of churches. And this was my first look into what Aaron and some of these churches have to deal with broken people. We'll talk about that in a minute. So our van's all loaded up. I don't know if you remember this or not, Aaron. Our van's all loaded up with kids, and I think I was driving at that point, or maybe Aaron was. I can't remember. But we're getting ready to pull out, and this guy, we're at the church actually loading up. That's where we met. And this is like the church was closed basically, but was it a Saturday, or I don't remember. But it was definitely off hours. And this guy comes over to like either the van or the church. And then somebody comes over to Aaron, like a church member or something, and says, Aaron, we need you, or something. And this guy had 2 black eyes. He was all mangled. It looked like he'd been in a car wreck and a fight all at the same time. And my eyes got really big, and Aaron left for about 5 minutes. This guy left for about 5 minutes, and Aaron got in the van and got ready to drive away. And he says, welcome to my world. And this guy, he just came in off the street. He had no idea what to do, but he needed help. He wasn't a church member. He wasn't a church member, was he, Aaron?
No. No,
No,
I'd never seen him before in my life.
but somehow Aaron and the church had a great reputation, like, hey, they help broken people. And so this guy got sent there. I don't know whatever happened with him, but I know he got good help. I know he got good help. And so it's like my eyes just opened to like, man, somebody that can deal with people like that and be empathetic and love them. Oh man, I couldn't comprehend it. And so it's changed how I deal with people. It changes the empathy that I try to have with people. And so thank you for that, Aaron. I really, really appreciate. I've never I've been through lots of people that are professionals that have PhDs in psychology and whatnot. You can't get any better advice than you can get from Aaron Couch. So thank you very much, Aaron.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So um, I want to start with something. I want you to talk about it, though. We talked about it a little bit off the air, and I don't know if I'd ever talked to you about it before. Tell us about how brokenness and loneliness are connected.
I think that most all brokenness is
Describe
rooted in
describe brokenness. What
um
give us examples of behaviors that you would be broken and what it is?
so I would probably back up and say I'm preface I will work from the presupposition. Let me talk in scientific language for you. I will operate from the hypothesis
I like it.
that that people we're hardwired for connection. Like that's not new data. That's been around for a long time. And I think that generally speaking, we are we want to think the best of people. But the problem is, as time goes on, we have experiences that put fractures on our heart and our emotional center, that keep us from being able to do that. That keep us from being able to stay in the best. And I when I say that, people immediately run to the extreme of, well, what about an abuser? What about a sociopath? What about well, people that don't have the capacity for empathy, that you're talking, it's a whole different conversation. But generally speaking, we want to be able to connect with people, and at our heart's like deepest level is a desire for connection. And the problem is we experience things because of other any number of reasons. Some of it is people are mean sometimes. Some of it is people do things and we misinterpret it. Some of it is we put it through a filter that's a very limited perspective, and we're trying to figure out what they meant. What did they say? How did they, and so now all those filters that we put, like if you say something to me, I only have what you said, and then like your body language and that kind of thing. I don't know what you were thinking. I don't know what you were feeling when you said it. I don't know. And but what I do as a human is I have to close the loop on that. Like there's these things that I know, and then there's all these things that I don't know. Now what my brain does then is it will close the loop with all of the like, here's what I think he meant. Here's what I think where I think his heart was. And there's no obligation for that to actually be true, but my brain wants to close that loop. So it has to. It actually has to. And so, like, I think that for the most part, loneliness forces us. It allows us to stay broken. What I love about connection is connection forces me to deal with how I close the loop, and all the unhealthy ways that I close the loop. Connection forces me to heal those, or I stay lonely.
Yeah.
It's just it's inevitably the way that human relationship functions.
So one of the things when we were talking about brokenness and loneliness and how they were connected, for 3 or 4 years ago, when I was talking to Aaron about it, when some pretty dark times in my life, and I mean, I had so many externally, I had so many things going for me, but I actually was lonely. I didn't know it, and I didn't have actually a lot of close relationships. And I remember Aaron talking to me, saying, "Yeah, you need about 4 or 5 people in your life that you can basically just tell anything you want to, and they're not going to judge you." And I didn't have that at the time. And I don't think I went out and tried to seek it. I actually think God was putting these people in my life. And all of a sudden, the next thing you knew, there's this person, and then a friend of this person, and then a friend of this person. And I've got all these people in my life that I'm just spilling my guts to. And I mean, and they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, that's good." And then they spill their guts to me. Oh, and I'm like, I'm still going to love this guy. He's still going to be my friend, And that's when I finally started becoming not lonely. And it's the strangest thing. And, everybody's got bad habits. And I had some that, and I'm not saying I'm not broken. I think all of us are a little bit broken, but boy, a lot of those habits went away when I became not lonely anymore.
Mm.
And so, Aaron, I thank you for that. And I suspect when we go through this, when we talk about this pandemic, because Aaron's always about connection with people. And when we talk about this and faith during these times, I suspect he's going to somehow put connection in there as well. And because God has lots of good stories about that in the Bible, about connecting with people. Nobody goes through anything alone. They always
Right.
have God for sure.
Right.
And so I just always loved how you've talked about connections and how important they actually are. And before we move on to faith, what would you say advice-wise, Aaron? And you talked a little bit about it already, kind of the science behind it. And people have, fractured hearts and some trauma, childhood trauma, or some trauma bond has happened to them where they just say, hey, I want to be alone and surrounded by cats the rest of my life. And that's it. You
Mm-hmm.
probably heard of these people, correct?
Mm-hmm. Oh
And
yeah.
I'm not saying, I don't want to say anything is wrong or right. That's for somebody else to judge. But do you think that's a good thing to do?
I don't. Biologically, I don't think it's like, remove the spiritual element from it. Physiologically, we're hardwired to connect to people. Like we are. And so like you're denying a piece of your humanity to avoid that connection.
So what?
Just,
So why do people do it? And what advice would you give them to try to get over that?
oh gosh. Well, I mean, safety. People do it because they don't, we don't like pain. Like who wants to be hurt? And inevitably people are going to hurt one another. That's the thing about connection, is that connection means that I'm letting you deep enough into my life to hurt me.
Yeah.
Whether you do it on purpose or by accident, that's the dark side of love, right? But to not experience love, I remember C.S. Lewis, the life story of C.S. Lewis, which C.S. Lewis is a great Christian author, is a contemporary of J.R.R. Tolkien, and the life story of him is made into a movie called Shadowlands. And in the movie, for a long part of it, he refuses to fall in love because he's like, love is just this trivial thing and it's only pain and da 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 da. And he's like, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself through that pain? Well, at some point, this gal sees through it all, and like all great women do, and he falls for her, and they get married, and then she gets cancer and dies. And so he has to deal with this, like, I didn't want to love because I was going to experience pain and loss, and then I fell in love and it happened. And at the end of the movie, he has this amazing quote where he says, what I've learned is that the pain is part of the love. It's what gives our love depth and meaning and texture. And that's the, like, it's this really profound moment where I was like, yeah, that's true. Like, yeah, you can avoid the pain of connection, but you don't selectively numb. That's what Brene Brown talks about. You don't selectively numb. When you numb the pain, you also numb the joy. You
Yeah.
numb creativity, and you numb growth, and you numb progress. Like you numb all of those things when you try to avoid pain. And so in the end, you can do that. You can be you and your cats and whatever. You're just missing the best parts of life in order to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you give to advice to the people that may want to do that and may just want to isolate for self-protection and safety?
You know,
A parent safety.
I would say, first of all, like, just get some people where you can share your story, like share your life, share your past, share your story. I remember you and I were having lunch one day, and I was just sharing a piece of my story, and you said, did somebody talk to you about me? And I said, no. I said, why? And you said, because that's exactly where I am right now. And I said, well, why didn't you say something? And what you said to me, Shane, was, you said, I didn't know that I was allowed to.
Yeah. It's true.
And I was, man, I've always hung on to that. I was like,
Interesting. I
really?
vaguely remember that. I don't remember it in that detail, but I remember that conversation. That was in like, and then you asked for it, so you got it. You got my whole story, all the messiness.
Yeah. And
And it was interesting. I keep your thought there, Aaron, because we were. I mean, look, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm going to compose myself this time, but the majority of the times that I talk with Aaron, I cry. And I'm going to compose myself during this time. I'm live to the whole world. But I remember we were one of the first times we met, and I mean, obviously the guy's, this isn't his first rodeo. All right. So he's seen broken people, and so I'm having lunch with him, then I have another lunch with him and another one. And he just, every time he just started collecting more information, never judged me, never kept going to lunch with me, but they were pretty, we talk wrestling, we talk our, our children, our kids dated one another at one point. My daughter dated his son, and it was, and so we sometimes talk about that. But then finally he asked me a straightforward question that I couldn't lie to. And that's when he got the whole story. And it was like, but you know what? I'm serious. If I didn't have him at that point in my life, not sure where I'd be. So I
Mm.
really appreciate. Now, what were you thinking?
Um, I was just thinking about one of the things that talk with people a lot about is like you share your story, and some people are going to use it against you in some way. Some people are going to hurt you. Some people are going to,
Sure.
but what you'll find is that that represents a very small percentage of the people that you will connect to. It is a percentage, it is real, and that's just this wonderful thing that we call being human, and all of our ups and downs, all of our brokenness and successes. Like, yes, there is a percentage of people who are going to leverage it against you, but the vast majority of people will see you, they will hear you, and they will understand you, and that's the beauty of it.
Well, what I found, I mean, these are people that are well respected and look clean on the outside, look clean to the public, and you start sharing your story, and then they share theirs, and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought that only happened in movies. But it's great to, and then you are going to have some people that I guess hurt you by giving somebody else information or gossip or whatever. And that's just when you have to decide what the appropriate boundaries are in every single relationship that you have. And
Yep.
I'm just thankful that, like I said, like you gave me advice a long time ago, have 4 or 5 people in your life that you can basically share everything with. And there's boundaries in those relationships, obviously, but you got to, I'm thankful for it. I mean, I have friends now that I've called up at midnight or 1 o'clock a.m. and they answer their phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought I would have something like that. And so
Yeah.
for that, I'm really, really grateful. And I'm thankful for that, Aaron. And so let's move on. So we're obviously in a pandemic. You're quarantined. I'm quarantined. Our churches are quarantined. We can't meet together on Sundays. We're doing it through Zoom, and so it affects all of our lives. And it's strange. It's really weird to drive down main streets, or you look at I-5 in LA and it's not busy. It's a weird time we're living in. And so obviously the economy is affected. People's jobs are affected. So many, I assume that probably affects tithings for churches, all kinds of things that could be happening. What are you seeing, in your day-to-day counseling and just with your staff and with all the people in your church? What are you seeing the common fears and concerns are during this pandemic and quarantine and self-isolation? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think in the end, the thing below the thing below the thing, the bottom line is everybody's afraid because we don't know. That's the worst. Um,
Uncertainty.
if we knew that this was going to be 60 days, and at the end of this 60 days, it was going to be like the Great Depression, and there's nothing that we could do about it. It's just going to be that way. If we knew that, we could emotionally prepare for it. Now there's like, well, we're going to bounce back. Oh, it's going to be a long recovery. Oh, we're going to be in the house forever. Oh, it's going to be 18 months before back. Like we don't know that's the hard part, is that we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's the flux of not knowing that kills us, I think. And that's been my, whether someone is a person of faith or not, I think even for people who have really solid faith, and even for myself, I have moments where I'm like, you know what, I'm good. God's got this. I can rest in that. And then there's times where I'm like, this is this is scary, and are we going to be okay? And am I going to have to lay off staff? Am I going to, I'm going to have to go to the church and say we're failing? Like, and there's layers to why that matters. There's like, I feel like a failure as a leader. Are people going to reject me personally, like as an individual? Am I going to fail my family in some way? Are we going to have to sell our house? I mean, there's so many,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
And that's the scary part, I think, for a lot of people. That's really what, at the end of all the all the excuses that hang off of that, that's really the core of it.
Yeah. Can you describe, because we have lots of viewers that may believe in God, may have faith. Describe your definition of faith, and I guess for a secular and God-fearing population.
Yeah. So my faith is not mental assent. A
What do
lot
you
of
mean
people
by what do
just
you mean by that?
a lot of people believe that faith means acknowledge that God exists.
Yeah.
Well, Satan acknowledges that God exists. Like that's like if you're going to believe the biblical narrative, um, James says that even the demons believe and shudder. You say you believe God, big deal. Faith, both in the Hebrew and in the Greek, it would be better translated faithfulness. That it's a belief that leads to an action. That I believe it enough to do something with it. That I believe it enough that it actually trickles down into how I actually make decisions, how I live my life. Not just that I acknowledge that it's real.
Give an example of that. A belief
Well,
that leads to action. Okay.
yeah.
Give an example.
Um, do I share my faith with my friends? Simple thing. Um, if I believe that the biblical narrative is true, but I don't share that with my friends, like that I think um, that would be the worst act of unloving. If you really believe that the biblical narrative is true and that the consequences of how we live our life is played out in a certain kind of way, um, how do you not share that with people you love?
Yeah.
How do you keep that
Absolutely.
a secret?
Yeah.
That would I got to believe it enough to do something with it, not just acknowledge that it's good for me and you figure it out. But it should change like my ethics at work. Do I try to make sure that everything's about me and my job and my status and my promotion, or am I taking care of other people along the way? I'm reading a great book right now called Playing God by Andy Crouch, and his whole premise is that the reason why people are given power is to make other people powerful. And when I make you powerful, I don't diminish my own power. I exponentially increase power. And his example is he takes cello lessons, and he's like, my teacher has all the power in that relationship, but by teaching me how to play cello, he doesn't become less powerful. I become more powerful. And so the idea of power from the biblical narrative isn't that we hoard it, or that I don't make you more powerful than me. I don't let you I want you to know that you need me. The idea of biblical power is that I give power away freely, because in doing so, I exponentially increase God's power on earth.
That's awesome. That's a great example. That's excellent. Now, when you think about, faith and, call to action, basically, so we're living in, I guess, uncertain times. So you're talking about the biggest issue that you are seeing with people is uncertainty. They
Mm-hmm.
just don't know what's going to happen. So that a lot of people need to know what's going to happen so they can plan for it. Sometimes we call these people planning type personalities, but a lot of people want to know that, especially that are parents, and how will it affect my children, and so on and so forth. And so do you think have you seen this on, let's just talk about a global or a community level, but also on an individual level? Have you seen this type of fear in your lifetime?
Not in my lifetime, not like this.
Interesting. So
Um,
talk about that.
I mean, there have been like 2007, 8, 9, right? We had the big economic recession. That was just the most recent one, and that was, people were concerned. Now, that being said, I was living in Moscow at the time, and the thing that we know about a recession is that when it happens and people lose their jobs, they're going to go back to school and they're going to eat. Moscow's two sources of economy is university and agriculture. So they didn't experience it at the same level, but people were concerned about that. Right now, it just feels like this is so transcendent, because it's really leveling every part of our life. It's the health and the legitimate, like my parents might die.
Yeah.
My friends, my family members might die. Like that's a real thing. And then beyond that, it's what does this mean for my future? What does this mean for my job? What does this mean for my ability to just provide for so it's bigger. It's bigger than what I've experienced in my life.
Interesting. Have you ever seen, so let's talk about that fear. So it's one of the biggest fears that you've seen in your life as far as a global or a community. So everybody's experienced it. Let's call it that. Is it obviously there's been situations that you've probably counseled people individually that they've been very fearful for whatever reason, and probably good
Mhm.
reason, an abusive relationship or something like that.
Mhm.
Are those all connected? Is the fear the same? Is the uncertainty the same? And how do you handle it globally versus individually? Is the message the same? So I'm opening up. Just go ahead to talk about that.
Yeah, I don't. Fear is fear. What it's rooted in depends a lot on how we respond to it. And that, like, do I need to know a particular characteristic of God, a particular part of His nature? In is the part of God's nature that helps me have strength to move forward? Is that the same in a domestic violence situation that it is in my business just closed? Um, I, I don't know, to be honest with you. I think that becomes pretty situation specific, and trying to get people to share, like, what's the real fear that's driving this. What's the real thing that's going on here. I think that becomes a big deal in helping us understand how to properly navigate that conversation with other people.
I wonder if a lot of it is you think about what's different, and it's interesting. It's a great example. You use the economic situation or the recession of 2007, 8, and 9, which obviously affected a lot of people. Most of us are old enough to remember it and to experience have experienced that, and it did affect us financially. I wonder if it's because there's a precedence for that of either mini recessions or even depressions that we survive it, whereas there's less precedence for a pandemic like this that makes it more uncertain. Do you think that's what it is?
Maybe, and certainly not in my lifetime. I do not remember, um,
Yeah.
this kind of. And even, people have been like, well, the Great Depression. Well, that wasn't about people getting sick and dying. That wasn't about a virus that we can't see and we don't understand yet. It was economic, but it was different. It's interesting to me, like, during the Depression, the stock market collapse, the economy collapse, and we go, okay, we got to take measures to have that never happen again. And now, like, we're in this new global pandemic, this fear with a thing that we can't even see.
Right.
Like, we can't even see it. We don't know what it is. We've never seen it before, and now humans are passing it to tigers, and
Yeah,
it's
it is
like
interesting.
it's bizarre. Like, this is
Yeah.
the newest. It's weird.
We don't know the Do you think it's fear of death?
I think it's fear of an unknown future.
Interesting. Now, so it's fascinating what you say, and you've been you've experienced so many different people even in this situation. And so do you find a certain segment of the population, maybe for example, um, older people, that elderly, I'm not going to categorize anybody, but elderly people that maybe have had faith, that they're not afraid because they're not afraid of death? I'm trying to figure, I'm a thinker, I'm a scientist, I'm trying to figure this out too. Why I'm not, I'll be honest with you, I'm not afraid. I don't know if it's because I know some of the science involved. I don't know if it's because these things have happened in the past. I don't know. I can't explain it. I'm not afraid. It doesn't mean that I'm going to not follow any directions or anything like that that people suggest. It's just that I'm not afraid. And I can't explain why. I'm trying to understand, why are so many people afraid? So is there a different segment of the population, or can you define that?
I think people are afraid for different reasons. I do think, our culture is, slowly but surely losing our fortitude. That comes with entitlement, and that's a whole separate conversation, right?
Yeah,
But,
that's true.
I think we don't. I think there's certain people, though, that in their entitled attitude are like, the government will bail us out. Like, so entitlement works both ways. And that's for as far as fear is concerned. And I think for some people, the elderly are like, we've experienced too much to freak out.
Yeah. Right.
There was an old Little House on the Prairie episode where they had a drought and everybody was freaking out. And throughout the whole episode, there's this old guy sitting on his porch in a rocking chair, just rocking back and forth, not worried about a thing. And at the end of the episode, they're like, "How can you be calm?" And he basically goes on this diatribe about, we've been through this before.
Yeah.
We'll be okay. And I do think, like, if you're going to measure history, the human population is going to survive this. We
Absolutely.
are, like, at the end of the day, the earth is not ending.
Right.
Economics come and go, seasons of plenty come and go, diseases come and go, Spanish flu,
Sure.
there's all these examples. So if you're measuring history, it can give you like the measurable data that we have says we're going to survive. The question that I think people wrestle with is what's going to be the cost.
Yeah, sure.
And that's the
Yeah.
part that nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think that we're not only going to survive, but I think we're going to thrive because we always, that's one of the things that's unique about the human species is that we respond in a way we learn. And so then we say, okay, what did we learn from that? And then we respond by putting in place whatever it is, or to make measures better for the human species, which is, I think, obviously something, a gift that God gave us. And so you say we've never seen this in our lifetime, Aaron. You've never seen something like this, and maybe our parents or our grandparents did, whatever. But tell us about biblically. Have they seen things like this?
Well, so the biblical narrative um, is built on God's interaction with mankind. So I always want to be really careful when, like, are there places where there was diseases that went through and lots of people died? Yes, those places are moments where God is directly intervening in mankind to bring them back to the story that He's trying to tell in the world.
So I like that lesson there. So tell us more about that and why you think that COVID-19 is or is not similar.
Yeah, well, let me say, first of all, I don't know. Let me be very scientist in this. I don't know if this is God or not, and I wouldn't presume to ever speak for the mind of God. What I have is a recorded scripture that allows me to see examples where it did happen that way. That doesn't mean that every single time that it happened that way, it was God's reckoning.
Yeah.
And that religious dogma is so destructive. It's so destructive to jump into, like, this is the wrath of God, turn back to, turn or burn.
Understood. Yeah, understood.
But there are examples where, for example, people are stricken with leprosy, or there are disease and sickness that are unknown that go through a group of people, and until they repent, and then God restores them, because the goal isn't about trying to make them pay for what they did wrong. It's about getting them back onto the story that God's trying to tell in the world. And that's again another conversation. But there are examples of that in the Bible. When the children of Israel wandering around in the desert, and I've walked chunks of that desert. I know why they complained, because it's freaking hot. It's like, it's miserable. It's miserable there, and there's no shade. And I know why they complained. And then God sent snakes on them. Don't complain. Just trust me that I'm working out a good thing. And I think that bigger lesson of, regardless of if this is just viruses or viruses, they happen. And as a person of faith, I would say, in a fallen world that we live in, sickness is part of the game, and sometimes it's really devastating.
And so how can God be glorified through this? And it relates to something we talked about off the air, about what Aaron was telling me is one of the things that he's seeing that's very positive in this. I'm seeing it too. Even though we're connecting through Zoom and whatnot, I see a lot more connection now, a lot more people wanting connection. So what is the message that God, maybe God didn't cause this? We don't know, but what is the message and how He can be glorified through this?
Well, I think I'm going to start kind of 30,000 feet and ratchet down. What everybody wants to know when something like this is happening is, okay, why? Why is this happening? Why is God allowing this? If you're going to inject God into the conversation, why is God allowing this? Why? He either caused it or He allowed it. Either way, He's an ogre of a God. I don't, blah, blah, blah.
That's always my common question, because people still ask me this to this day, and I can never answer it. I'm always like, you got to go talk to Aaron. So I want to hear it. We're live
well,
now.
I think it's the wrong question. And the problem, and this as a scientist, if you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer every time. Like, first of all, it's not for us to know. If God is God, he's the one who sees it all. We don't. Secondly, even if you got the answer to why, it would not be satisfactory, because why is not really what we're looking for. And that's a much deeper, much broader conversation. What we're looking for more is like, what now? What do, so I don't know why it happened. I don't know. I mean, I heard somebody was talking about it being traced back to eating undercooked bats. I don't know. I don't even know how they've measured that, but like, why would somebody eat a bat, let alone an undercooked? I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, let's assume that I don't know if it's true or not. That's just what I heard. I don't know why. I don't know why. What I do know is it happened. And so the question is, what now?
Okay, so let's answer that question. What now?
That's a better question.
Okay.
And what I'm observing is people are really rallying around their community. I'm seeing that over and over and over again. And it's just beautiful to watch as people are taking care of their neighbors, especially their neighbors that are at increased risk, whether they have, respiratory issues or they're elderly or whatever. These people that are like, hey, don't worry about it. I'll go to the grocery store for you. And they're people are really caring for people. They're really caring. And I'm watching communities of people. And here's what I'm also observing, and this may be further conversation later. People that were connected going into this isolation are doing way better than people who were not.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is that even introverts are going, man, I actually really want some level of connection. Yeah. Some of them went into this shelter in place mandate going, I've been training for this my whole life.
Yes, I have friends like that.
But even those people are like, man, I really do miss people, and people who were connected on the front end are doing much better now, 2 or 3 weeks into this than they were previously. But that's the people that are actually caring for one another. They're not expecting a government entity or a church program or something like, they're not expecting any of that to do it because they can't. They're not in a position to be able to go and do that. It's people caring for people, and that power. I mean, our people are in love with the opportunities that they're getting to serve. It's just been incredible.
Well, it's interesting because, we were basically talking about faith, and your definition of faith is essentially believing in something and then a call to action. And maybe that's the call to action, is to connect with people, to help people. And maybe that's, I don't know. Again, I'm always going to look for answers and try to answer because I'm a scientist at heart. But maybe that's what God wants in this whole message, is it's like, you want to know what isolation's like? Well, here's what it's like. And I don't know what's going to happen in 10 days, 20 days, 60 days, but I suspect there's going to be lots of big gatherings of gratefulness, of some grateful people. Some of them are probably going to be huge, out of control parties, but a lot of them are just going to be grateful people getting together, of people they probably never met, but they're friends of friends of friends. And I know people that are already talking about that. And maybe that's the message that God wants here. And that's the call to action. I don't know. What do you think of that, Aaron?
I love that. And I think like I've said from day one of all of this really being something that we felt like we needed to take action on as a nation, I've said, I love this because it's going to force the church out of the four walls of the building.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it's done, because the building isn't the church. The building, the corporate body, the group of people should be an entity that empowers each one of us to go out and make a difference. It's not the church building, the church organization is not the stopgap between me and God. That is not what it is. It's there to help push me and empower me and release me out to be what God made me to be from day one. Yeah. And so I'm I'm loving watching the church be the church right now in ways that people haven't seen it in a long time, like that they just feel like, yeah, I can do this. I can make a difference. And it's been really, really fun as from sitting in my seat to be able to watch it happen.
What great stories. I think that's just really, really amazing. And so we talked about what faith is. And so what would be, we talked about faith. So faith is in your definition, which is a great one, by the way, is a belief and then a call to action. So what would your call to action be to people during this time?
Whether you're a believer or not, I think the call to action is exactly the same. Um, my oldest daughter, she was struggling with her faith at one point, and she was like, "Yeah, Dad, I just don't know if I believe in God or whatever." And I said, "You know what? Here's all I'm going to say to you." Um, she was on her way out to college in at the opposite end of the country.
I
So
remember those times.
I'm turning my daughter over to the world, scared to death. And I said, listen, when you don't know what to do, when any time in your life, whether you accept God or not, if you don't know what to do, act like Jesus. Like, you're never going to go wrong when you do that.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the call to action for anybody, believer or not. If you don't know what to do, act like Jesus.
So let's think about some of those people. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't know who Jesus was until I was an adult. 20, 21 years old, something like that. I really didn't know. I didn't grow up with it. So for those that might not be, know who Jesus is, how would you describe? If you tell somebody who doesn't know Jesus, act like Jesus, how would you summarize that?
Yeah, I would sum it up in two statements that Jesus makes. Number one is, um, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the first statement. And if you can't go, I don't know God, I don't believe in God. I don't. Okay, you can still love your neighbor as yourself. You can
Absolutely.
still do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
The second one is, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you.
Yeah.
That, and the golden rule. Those are both statements of Jesus.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor as
Is that
yourself.
in the gospel then?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Got it.
Love your neighbor as yourself, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And not just leverage that as a way to make other people be nice to you, but to take it serious. Like, if I was shut in, what would I want? If I was lonely and feeling hopeless, what would I want? What would I need? How could I serve somebody who would be in my dark moments what I would need?
Yeah.
How can I do that?
That's
Um,
that's that's amazing advice. I remember it's something similar to maybe that Aaron said to his daughter. Um, you know, I I was probably a phone call 2 years ago or something, and I'll be honest, I wasn't feeling very godly at the time. I don't feel godly a lot of the times, by the way. I never feel like I'm worthy, but Aaron helped me work through that. And I called him up, and I'd missed another Sunday, and I was kind of embarrassed and ashamed, and I hadn't seen him in a while. I'm like, Aaron, I just don't even feel like going to church. It's even hard for me to pray. And here's what he told me. He says, well, Shane, when you're ready, God will still be waiting for you.
he's
I was
not
like,
going anywhere.
that's what he said. He's not going anywhere. I'm like, okay, and I like what you said about doing to your neighbor as you want done to you. And I hear a lot of my friends or even some of my family members say about their relationships with maybe their spouse or their kids or another friend. It's like, they never call me. I'm like, well, do you call them? Well, no, but they haven't called me for a long time. Will you call them? And so I think, a lot of people, we take that verse, and I've always tried to find it. I'm not good at finding verses in the Bible, but doing to others as you want done to you. That's kind of how I describe it is, well, take the step. Yeah,
Yep.
a relationship
Do
is
it first.
do it
You
first.
do it first.
A relationship is reciprocal. And I remember getting text messages and voicemail messages and phone calls from Aaron during some really tough times of mine. And he would just say, hey, how you doing? And that's it. And I didn't realize he had his own stuff going on too. And so I've tried to be there for him for that, but I just am I can't be the helper that he can. I'm just telling you. And so that's been really, really good. If that's our call to action, is love our neighbor and, and do unto others as we would want done to us. And so I want to go back to something that I think is important, Aaron, because it was important in how I viewed God. And it was you and another great faithful friend of mine who loves Jesus. And I don't understand it, and I still can't explain these things to people when they ask me. So I would like you to explain it again. So I was in the, I guess, I was in one of the first churches I was in. It was basically, I'm not going to, gosh, I don't want to use really strong terms here, but it was kind of like gloom and doom. Like, there's going to be only 3 people saved in this world,
You
and
better be one of them.
you better be one of them. And I was always like, Oh man,
It's a lot of pressure.
it's a lot of and I think the number is like 44,000. People can say that, whatever. It was a number that I'm just thinking, oh my gosh. And so it was always hard to please God, and it was always, we had to be perfect, and God is very wrathful. And that's something that's really, that Aaron helped change. And another friend of mine too, who I think is still called to be a preacher, and I hope he is someday. But God loves us no matter what. And there are
Mm.
stories in that in the Bible, I mean, of murderers, like Paul, for example, but who was still loved by God. And so it doesn't mean, I want Aaron to explain this, it doesn't mean that life won't have consequences, but God will still love you. Can you talk about that time and relate it to what we're going through now? Because I think some people think that they're, even in these situations, especially those that are in a church, that, oh my gosh, this is caused by God. I must be sinning, so God hates me. Do you think there's a segment of the population like that?
Yep, I sure do.
Okay, explain that. And I'm not saying what's right or wrong. I'm saying what has worked for me. I'm a
Mhm.
sinner every single day, and I know no matter what, God will love me. Can you expand on that, Aaron?
Yeah, I would say I would give you two passages, and there's a little bit of background work to do there. With the first five books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These are written to a group of people who've been slaves for 480 years, and so they have no sense of themselves, no sense of identity, no sense of this God that wants to partner with them, no sense of any of it. And so what happens is God leads them out of Egypt through all the plagues and all that stuff, and he takes them to Sinai, Mount Sinai, and he has this really cool interaction with them where he's like, I'm going to show you what I'm like. And so they begin to write down the story. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and the spirit hovered over the face of the deep. God said, let there be light, right? And so there's all these things, and it was good. It was good. It was good. This is where God begins our story, not with an angry, wrathful, vengeful God, but with a God who created a good world full of good things. And when he created mankind, he didn't go, oh my gosh, what a sinner. He said, no, that is really good. I like everything else I did was good, but that's extra special. Like this perfect marriage of soil and spirit. That's from the Genesis 1 account. That's where our story begins. And I think
Right.
the problem for a lot of us is that we begin our story in Genesis 3, which is where the fall of man enters in, and we're like, no, you're a fallen, you're a sinner, you're horrible, you can't do anything right, you're totally depraved, you're da 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 da. But I think the problem is that's not where God begins our story. And that's not where God ends our story. Like God begins and ends our story with a God who loves us and is for us. And so all the rest of the sin and the unrighteousness and the call to holiness and all that all has to be set under the umbrella that God is for us and that he loves us and that he created us full of potential. And so I would leave that leads me to, I think, how Paul understands in Romans 8, and I'll just read the passage for you. He's talking in Romans 7 is about what a wretched man I am. I do what I don't want to do, and what I want to do, I don't do that. Who can save me? And then he starts in Romans 8 and he says, there's no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus. Like that's all that battle, all that wrestling, all that messing up, like that for those that are in Christ Jesus, that doesn't exist because we have a higher reality that we're living for. And then at the end of that, he says, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave himself up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? And then he, skipping a couple of verses, it says, no, in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Like, or
Wow.
pandemics or economic failures, or nothing separates us from his love.
Wow. That's
Nothing.
powerful. That is really
And
powerful.
that hope gives us the ability to endure. That's really where faith takes root for us, right?
Yeah.
Like trials, pain exposes our faith. It reveals it for what it is, right? And so the hope that we have in faith is that we don't serve the stock market. That's not where our allegiance lies. It doesn't make the stock market evil. It isn't where our allegiance lies in a God who holds the universe together, and who, quite frankly, there's nothing that we can do to make him love us any less or more than he does already.
Wow. Now, I want to follow that up. That's powerful. I mean, it gives me chills. I really appreciate that, Aaron. I want to follow that up. And I'll be honest. And I think this is the whole point. And when I try to talk about my God to people and about this, is God's going to love us no matter what. It doesn't mean life won't have consequences. If you steal, if you kill, which is obviously breaking a commandment, you might go to jail. You might get the death penalty. All these different things might happen. It doesn't mean God won't love us. And
Right.
and the immediate response to me as a non-preacher is to me when I say that to people is they're like, well, that just doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, me either. It doesn't. I can't comprehend his love, and I think that's the point. I'm still trying to grow through that. I'll probably grow through it until my dying day, but I can't comprehend the love that he has for me. Those passages that you just read, very powerful, Aaron. I appreciate that. That was Romans 8, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So last thing before we talk about maybe some of your special projects and what excites you and, some philanthropy or something is Romans 13.
Okay.
You've probably heard a lot about this recently. Maybe, maybe not.
Let's go ahead and let's see if I have or not.
Okay. So if I believe it's correct, isn't it Romans 13 where it talks about give to Caesar, give to the government what is the government's basically?
Okay, that's in the Gospels. That's actually Jesus. They ask him whether or not they should pay tribute to Caesar.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on right now? We're highly mandated and controlled by the government. We're listening to them. They're hurting our economic freedoms. And I'm not saying it's bad or good. That is a conversation that may happen soon. Actually, we're going to have a constitutional attorney on my podcast in the next couple of weeks. Where we're going to talk about those liberties. Okay. Stay tuned.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean for us as God-fearing people? And I want to make an extreme model because that's what scientists do is have models. When we listen to the government, which I'm not saying we shouldn't during these times, should we have also listened to Hitler? What does God say about that? Because a lot of people are just saying, even in God-fearing people, and I don't know the answer, Aaron. If the government says it, God says you've got to follow it. So that's what Jesus said. Can you expand on that?
Well, yeah, I can do that. I think we got to begin. We got to begin with the Bible. Here's the thing to remember: the Bible is not written to 21st century Americans. It was written to people in a first century Roman world who the choice to acknowledge Jesus, the choice to acknowledge following Jesus as a Messiah was a death penalty. It was a death sentence. Like these are people that there's no games there. They were watching their children get butchered for their faith. And that's who Paul writes, submit to your governing authorities.
So, okay, I know I'm supposed to ask the what now. I'm going to ask why. So why would Paul, as a Christian, as one of the first apostles, why would he say, yeah, submit and your kids are going to get butchered?
Yeah. Well, here's the crazy thing. Like beyond that, Paul says there's no authority over you that isn't put there by God. He says that in Romans 13.
Okay.
There's no authority over you that isn't put there by God, which means Hitler. Which raises some incredible questions that are fascinating discussion, way bigger than we have time for today. But
I might have you back. It could talk to you for hours.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love that. It'd be great. But that's so yeah, like there's a real thing. Now, what happened was, as they honored that, they did suffer. And the cause of the kingdom of God went forward because of it. their suffering and how they suffered and the grace with which they treated the people who were torturing them actually caused those people who were torturing them to start following their God
Yeah. Wow.
because of how they, and that's the catch 22 of suffering. And again, theodicy is this, why do bad things happen to good people? Like, this is a massive conversation that we are not going to solve today. And I don't think there's a reason. I think there's a lot of reasons why. But that being said, it's really interesting. Like, as they honored the Lord first and said, God, I'm not asking you for a certain kind of life. I just want the privilege to know you and to spend eternity with you. And whatever that means, like you think about Job, when Job was, naked I came into this world, naked I'll leave, blessed be the name of the Lord. That was Job's perspective. How did he endure all this stuff? Well, that's why. Because his perspective was, there's something bigger than my quality of life here and now. There's something otherworldly. It's Simon Sinek, right? His infinite mindset, the infinite mindset. Well, I would call it the eternal mindset. Same thing, but focusing on things that matter way beyond this life.
Yeah.
It gives us a different paradigm in order to endure good things. We don't be overly comfortable with good things. We don't let, like the children of Israel do, we don't let ourselves get too comfortable with Egypt. We don't let ourselves get too comfortable with prosperity. And on the flip side of that, when things are hard, we don't let ourselves get overly panicked about difficult circumstances, because we know that both of those things are temporary. The things that are eternal are unchanging.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was their perspective. And that's who Paul is. That's his mess. What he's trying to encourage them with is, guys, this is going to pass. It is good. Well, I mean, Revelation, John writes in Revelation, like, his message to the first readers, and there's all kinds of conversations about what it means for us today, but his message to the first readers was like, hey, I just want you to know, I know you think it's going to get bad. It's actually going to be worse than you think. It's going to get really bad, but it's not going to stay bad.
Yeah.
And to him who overcomes, he will be given a crown of life. That's the mindset. And because of that, that's the faith, the God-centeredness that literally upended the most powerful nation in history.
Interesting. And so, you know what? Let's end it up with that. And before we talk about your special project or philanthropy, I love that verse you just talked about. I think it was in Revelations with John saying, to he that endures will have the crown of life. Is that basically what it says? And that maybe that's the faithful message. Maybe that's the call to action that God wants us to know during these times, is because I'm surprised, I'm a scientist and I travel around the world and I meet lots of different people, and a lot of them may or may not be believers. But here's what I know. You never know who's watching. You never know.
Right.
And so that's a great message, Aaron. I really, really appreciate it about faith and the pandemic that we're in right now, the quarantine, the self-isolation, how we can connect. I think that's the summary. Reach out to your friends, connect with them, do Zoom, do FaceTime, whatever even texting, if that's all you can do, it's still some type of a connection. Call them up. I know of people that graduated years ago from high school or college, and they hadn't talked to somebody they went to high school with since then, and they recently called them up. And that's a call to action. That's really, really awesome.
I got one quick story. We had
Absolutely.
one of our small groups in the church. They have several teenagers amongst the families that are in their small group together. And so one of the families decided that the teenagers needed to have a Zoom s'mores party. So they went to everybody's door and dropped off all the ingredients for s'mores. And then each of the kids went to their own fireplaces in their own backyard and turned on Zoom, and they all made s'mores together and hung out on Zoom, which is, I mean, is it ideal? No, it's not the same as being together, but it sure is a step in the right direction. I mean, there's just lots of those kind of cool stories that are happening.
That's an awesome story, Aaron. And I think we're going to remember those stories. And here's what I bet you is going to happen with that group of kids. They are going to do it for real time together when they can.
Yep.
And I think that's so there is a call to action here. There's faith, and there's a reason God's allowing us to do certain things during these times and wanting us to respond a certain way. So thanks, Aaron. What a great message. We're wrapping it up here. I want you to talk about two things, actually. I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I think is important, when obviously the podcast is called Secrets of Success, never be outworked is the theme. And Aaron, he exudes that, by the way. Okay. And I just think there's so many ways he's been successful not only a church planner, but a father, a husband, a friend. I could go on and on. Okay. Um, One of the keys to success is failing. And I'll say this again, just like I did on Monday in episode 1. Failing is only failing if you never learn from it and don't get back and respond to it. Mm-hmm. So I don't look at failure. I can honestly say that most people, I don't know, myself, I don't really think I've ever failed. That is not an arrogant statement. I have lots of apparent failures, but I've always learned from them and tried to move on. And that's like a growth mindset or an infinite mindset that Aaron was talking about. But I've learned from them. Name a failure in your life, Aaron, that would it be an apparent failure to maybe somebody on the outside or maybe whatever, however you define it, that led to even making you a better human being or a success story?
How vulnerable do you want me to be here?
As vulnerable as you think we should during quarantine.
Oh,
I know your story, and I know a lot of it. I don't know all of it, but you share with whatever you're comfortable with, Aaron. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, I can tell you, I mean, gosh, I think as a parent and as a spouse, like that's a perpetual learning curve, right? Like, there's always learning. I can think of so many. I don't know if I want to share them here. I would tell you, one of the things that I think I failed with, and we were sharing about this off air earlier, I feel like in leading people, I have not always been a leader who deals with conflict well. And I know that there's a lot of leaders that would say that because conflict is hard. Yeah. But I think particularly for me, what it did was it created a space where there was a lot of unnecessary tension and burden, not just for me, but for everybody that was involved in the space. And that in the end, once we moved into this new position, just reflecting back on what happened that went well that I want to reproduce, what happened that I don't ever want to do again. That being said, I think that, I failed in helping people understand the positive way that conflict can move a team forward. I failed as a leader in that. And I actually carry a lot of guilt about that. I mean, I know I probably shouldn't, because you can only do what you can do, right? But I feel bad for the people that I was leading, because I mean, this, when you fail as a leader, everybody that you're leading pays the price. Yeah. And so I feel that. I think, the good news is, coming into this new spot, I can help not have that reproduce itself. Leading the people here better has been something that's been a real priority for me. So I would say that's probably a major failure.
That's a great example. I was thinking about our conversation earlier, and even live here. And what did Aaron just say? Let's summarize that. He said that conflict can lead to better interactions or a better result if you lead through that process appropriately and your team is together. And that's something that I've experienced in the last couple of years, and especially this last year. And I'm not only about the people that I lead at work and that team, but my close relationships. You're always going to have conflict in those, and it doesn't have to be yelling and screaming. I'm to an age now where I don't do any of that anymore. I just don't have to. And I give you a lot of credit for that, Aaron, by the way. And so, but when you have these disagreements and you work through them, I've found in my close relationships, it makes you closer. And I've always read those studies, and I thought, oh, that's baloney. That could never happen, But people that disagree, once they work through it, even if there's not a resolution, even if there's still a disagreement, if you work through it without yelling and screaming and you agree to disagree, and I know we've heard this for years, I'm sure there's biblical passages in it, but it brings you closer. And it's, so I appreciate you being vulnerable, Aaron. And certainly I think you're a great leader, and I get it. We all have that guilt. And I think that's what makes us great leaders, is that we retrospectively think, oh man, I wish I would have done that different. And it sounds like we can learn from that. So thanks, Aaron, for that. So special projects or philanthropy or something that you're excited about, or you want, you want to support, or maybe you want other people to support, or whatever. What is that?
Yeah, so we have something that's going on right here in our world. Our church has a food bank called Secor Cares, and they literally help over 2,000 families a week.
Is
In
that locally in Denver then, or?
in Denver, greater Denver area, and they do all kinds of things. Like they do a program called Food for Thought, which is a lot of kids are living in poverty. They're dependent on the schools for food, or they don't eat. And so on the weekends, they prepare backpacks to help hand out at the schools for those kids to take home that are full of food that they can eat for the weekend. And it was like 17 different schools, 1,100 different students. I mean, it's a big deal. And like, it's just really cool to watch the different ways that they help. And now that people are out of work, kids are out of school, like the need for what they do is exponentially increased. And they shut down over 500 food banks in Colorado when this whole thing cut loose because of the concern of the spread of infections. Secor was one of the ones that was able to stay open. I think 50 in the state of Colorado were able to stay open, and they're being resourced and all that kind of stuff. I think they had 300 people come through in one afternoon.
Oh my,
Um,
that's wow.
it's incredible what they're doing, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it, and they've got a few paid staff, but for the most part it's all volunteer run. And these are people that are listed as essential workers as volunteers, but they're coming in and helping people make sure that they have food, and giving them enough for 2 weeks at a time. Feeling that they literally, people drive up, they pop the trunk on their car, the trunk comes open, volunteers walk out, load their trunk with prepackaged groceries. Like it's incredible what they're doing. Shut the trunk and the people drive off, so there's no like hand-to-hand contact with anybody.
That's incredible. Now,
But
what's that organization called? Can you spell it for the listeners as well?
yeah, Secor Cares is the name of it. Secor, Secor. You could probably Google it, Secor Cares, and in Parker, Colorado. And
Can you talk about your church, Aaron?
the church, in what sense?
Just, I don't think we even recognized it early on. Can you just mention your church, and if people want to go see your website or something before
Yeah,
we go off the air, I think it's they can just go see what you're doing and what you're up to and follow you.
yeah. So the church is Southeast Christian Church in Parker, Colorado. And the website is southeastcc.org. You can get on there and see all different kinds of things that we're doing. You can see sermons and all the different things that we're doing. Like right now, everything's online. So you can see that there's different resources available there, different ways for prayer. If we can pray for you in some way, I'd love to do that. If you want to email me, you can do that off the website. Yeah, it's there for anybody to have access to.
That's awesome. Aaron, this has been a fantastic show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for all that have joined us and are live on Facebook streaming. And we'll also edit this and have it available later for archives as well. And you are here with Aaron Couch, my pastor, and I'll always call him my friend, on Secrets of Success podcast, episode number 2 with Dr. Shane Needham, where the theme is Never Be Outworked. Join us next week. We'll keep you posted on who we're going to have. Stay tuned. And again, Aaron, thank you very much. I'm so grateful and humbled to have you on as a guest. And I'm probably going to have you on again. We could do this for a long, long time. So thank you very much, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Good. Thanks. So honored to be here. It's been fun to reconnect with you.
It definitely has. And we'll be in touch. Thank you, my friend.